Hi there guys, in the interest of full disclosure, let me just tell you that I've contacted NUX to get them to send me this product, and specifically this product because it's something that I was interested in using for myself. I looked at various combined reverbs and delays, and this was the one that appealed to me. So yeah, that's the full disclosure. It's difficult to know with a product that's been out this long how to approach the video. You know, it's been covered from every single angle. But I would just say that this is probably the most fully featured of the mid-range delays at around about 120 quid. Probably still after 5 years, and I think it was maybe a bit overlooked because 5 years ago was the peak of pedal mania, and I think that maybe because aesthetically it obviously draws a little bit from the Strymon products, I think people thought that it was just a Strymon knockoff, whereas in function it's clearly not. The Strymon was probably the El Capistan, which is a fantastic delay with reverb built in, although it used to be more of a hidden feature. But that's specifically a tape delay, whereas this is not. This is more of, dare I say, a generic delay and reverb combined pedal with 3 different types of reverb and 3 different types of delay. But it's the features, I think, that really set this one apart. Sound is obviously very subjective. I've got examples of every sound in this in just a minute, and you can work out whether you like it or not yourself. But I've written down a couple of the features. There's only a handful here that I really think are standouts. So on the back of the pedal, you've got a USB for updates, and the last update was really quite cool because they've now made it so that it has a dry defeat. So if you want to run a wet dry rig, you can do that with this, which is pretty neat for a compact delay and reverb pedal. It would also be a stereo out, so theoretically you could run and stereo out off a mono input, so you could run a wet dry wet rig if you had enough cabinets and enough inclination. The other thing you've got on here is a pad switch, which is great if you've got a very hot effects send. So on my SV20, which is what I use in this video, it's an incredibly hot effects send capable of distorting the input of most delays. But you've got a switch that will attenuate the input somewhat and not clip the front of the delay. You've got a series and parallel switch. Now I didn't use this, but I can see that on maybe bass, for example, it might be useful because it'll be a little bit cleaner. I will say that you've also got the ability to flip the order inside the pedal. You can do that on startup. So you can either have reverb going into delay or delay going into reverb for different types of effect. Just consult my notes here. You've also got obviously the shimmer thing, which I'll show you in just a second. The shimmer only applies on the plate reverb. On the spring and the hall, it's the hold feature. I'm going to come back to the hold feature because there's one thing that I think that they could improve with this pedal. But the thing that really, there's also, let me just say that it's a stereo input on a Y splitter cable. So you can put stereo in, but you would need a special cable to facilitate that. But the thing that really sold it to me was the tap tempo. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, Ben, loads of pedals have got a tap tempo. And that would be true, but this one is incredibly well implemented. So I'm going to show you that right now. So I just want to show you this tap tempo mode, and this is really well thought out, and I'm surprised it's not on more pedals. This controls your subdivisions. I've got it on 1-to-1 repeat. That's what makes sense to me. Basically, whatever I tap, that's the speed it goes. So I turn it on, and generally what happens with any pedal that has a single button for both on, off, and tap tempo is you'd have to hold it down for an extended period of time to enter tap tempo mode. You don't need to do that with this. I can simply tap, and it recognizes the rhythmical input and doesn't turn the delay off. I can then turn it off, I can turn it back on again, and then I could tap faster. And again, it's just recognized that rhythmical tap, and it hasn't turned it off. Really well thought out and incredibly usable in a live environment. So the hold feature is an interesting one and something that I really enjoy, particularly for making a track. However, there's a couple of things on this pedal that I would love to see them implement for a version 2. Not that they've said they're making a version 2, but if they did, I've got a couple of suggestions. So a slight modification to the hold feature. Right now, when you hold the reverb button down, in the spring or the hall settings, it will go into an infinite sustain. You can't, however, play over the top of that sustaining pad sound, because whatever you play feeds into the reverb trail and will become a big cacophonous mess. It would be killer if you could have some kind of a firmware update where you could hold it down and then play over the top of it and not have what you're playing feed into that reverb. Now, I understand that that might mean that what you're playing would be dry over the top, but don't forget you'd still have the delay to have some kind of atmosphere on it, and it would be worth the sacrifice, because I think a lot of people would buy a unit that has that infinite sustain pad sound. You know, those Electro Harmonix units are very popular. The Strymon pedal, the Big Sky, had it so that when you have the infinite sustain, you can play over the top of it, but it would be dry. Like I said, I think that it would be a really handy feature. The other thing that I would like is to turn this into a 4-parameter knob version of this pedal, so that you still have the 2 controls at the top for your levels, but the 4th one could be a modulation control. I really like having a modulated delay. It might be neat that maybe holding the delay button down, that modulation control could be a tone control for the delay, but I'm starting to make this into a much more complex unit. But having a modulation control wouldn't go amiss. You already have somewhat of a tone control in so much as this non-sequential numbering of the delays up here. So you have 70s, 60s, and 80s. I think the reason they've done that is because it gets progressively brighter as you go down. So the 70s being the darkest and the 80s being the brightest. I think that's why they've put the 60s in the middle. I think they were doing it more as in terms of brightness rather than having 60s, 70s, 80s, which would have made more sense from a naming perspective. This is a really great combined reverb and delay unit. I've enjoyed using it on gigs. I've had some good success with it over the last month or so. I want to thank NUX for sending it over to me, and I also want to thank them for not asking to see the video before it went up. There were no stipulations, there were no time constraints. They even said something to the effect of an unbiased review, so they seem like a really good company. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video and got something out of it, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.